When it comes to teaching group fitness, we have to be mindful that there are different types of learners. You have verbal, visual, and kinesthetic. When I teach group fitness, one of my favorite things to do is really use a lot of visual cues. For example, if we're doing an exercise where I want the participants to feel it in their glutes, I'll generally pat my glutes and really emphasize the hip motion so they get an idea of where they should be feeling the exercise. What type of visual cues do you use, Angel?
Usually in a large setting, to make sure people can see, I'll place my arms up high and give a countdown of 3, 2, and 1, so they know when we're ready to transition, a movement, or change to a different exercise.
You're right. Hand gestures can be a great way to do that. For example, when I'm teaching group cycling, I really like to use my hands to indicate that I either want the class out of the saddle or I indicate I want them to increase their level of intensity. That way, just giving that motion of moving up is an indication to them of what I expect them to do in that movement. Now, when it comes to verbal cues, when we're going to be giving speaking cues, what's your favorite verbal cue?
Setting the person up biomechanically with good form, I think should be at the top of the priority list. So if there's a piece of equipment that they need to place underneath their feet, I'll cue them to step over the band properly, draw their shoulders down and back, turn their palms facing forward, and then I'll usually throw in a breathing cue to inhale, prepare, and exhale, pull the band up.
And that's a great way to do it because we really need to get people to understand the most challenging thing about being a group instructor is we're trying to communicate to a number of different people at the same time. So by being able to walk people through what you expect them to do, where you want the equipment to be, how you want their body to set up, that's something that's really going to make you more powerful as an instructor. And you'll find that using verbal cues can be different and you can play a game with them. I mean, you can see what works.
Absolutely, and it's always a learning curve. You'll learn in every single class that you teach. Observation is key. You look at all the participants in class and you say, how can I get them to move correctly? How can I get them to move correctly? And the learning styles for everybody is so different. So you might give a cue that is good for that person, but that person didn't move accordingly. So now you have to rethink, how else can I say that? Or can I move towards that participant and actually show them the exercise again while I'm closer to them? Because maybe they didn't see me when I was up at the front of the room.
The way I look at it is if one or two people might be getting it wrong, well, I need to figure out how to communicate better to those individuals. But if I see a number of people not doing what I expect them to do, then I need to look at who's giving the cueing.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to kinesthetic cueing, kinesthetic means touching. But when we're cueing a group audience, it doesn't mean we have to touch every participant, does it? How do you use kinesthetic in your teaching?
Absolutely not. You're right. We can cue kinesthetically by getting the participant to feel a specific sensation. For example, during a squat, I'll get them to fire their glutes by getting them to imagine their glutes touching an imaginary chair behind them, squeeze the glutes as you stand up. So they get the sensation on where the muscle should be engaged.
Well, I like that too, because not only are you getting them to feel what's going on in their hips, but you're giving them a visual target. So if they imagine a chair's behind them, then they know where their bottom should be going. They know where their glutes, where their hips should be going in terms of the action.
Absolutely.
Another kinesthetic cue that I like to use is, like, for example, on a high plank or a push-up, is I have the participants imagine they're gripping the ground. They're pushing into the ground. Because if you really push into the ground, that's going to create a closed chain in the shoulder and get much more power in the shoulder for stability, whether you're doing a plank or a push-up.
Right.
So when it comes to kinesthetic cueing, it doesn't need to be you're going around and touch each individual, but what you're trying to do is set the stage so the participant knows what they're supposed to be feeling in their body. So like the example that Angel used of using the hips in the squat, we want the participants to know they should be feeling the exercise in their glutes, in their hips, not in their back, not in their knees. So giving them those cues, verbal, visual, and kinesthetic, and setting that three-dimensional stage for what they're feeling is essential to that.
Your book has a lot more information about the different three-dimensional cues, so you can reference that. What I always recommend for our new group fitness instructors is to think about the class format that you ideally want to teach. Think about the exercises that are involved in that type of format, and then think about if I was teaching that class and I had that visual, that verbal, and that kinesthetic learner, how would I cue a specific exercise that's going to be taught in that class to all of those different types of learners? How am I going to motivate them? How am I going to give numerical cues, motivational cues to help engage them all in the class experience?
Great. And one thing I always like to say when it comes to group exercise, if they walk out of the room, if they're smiling, if they're a little bit sweaty, and if you don't have any complaints, then you did everything right. Don't be intimidated about any class format. Practice your cueing, read through the manual, and you'll get the tools that you need to be a successful group fitness instructor.